The massive Galactic Union vessel hovered above Earth's atmosphere, its gleaming hull reflecting the sunlight as billions of humans watched from screens below. After centuries of wondering if they were alone in the universe, humanity finally had their answer. Commander Thomas Reed stood stiffly in his dress uniform as the airlock cycled open. As head of Earth's new Interstellar Relations Department, he had prepared for this moment for months. Behind him, a small team of Earth's finest diplomats, scientists, and military officers waited with bated breath. "Remember," Thomas whispered to his team, "we represent all of humanity today." The alien delegation that emerged was a sight beyond imagination. 6 different species, each wildly different in form, stepped forward. The leader, a tall blue-skinned being with 4 arms and silver eyes, approached with a translator device hovering near what appeared to be a mouth. "Greetings, humans of Earth. I am High Counselor Drav of the Galactic Union. We welcome your world to the community of stars." The meeting went smoothly at first. The aliens were impressed by human art, music, and culture. They marveled at Earth's biodiversity. But when discussions turned to military matters and space travel, the mood shifted. "You mean you test each vessel 3 times before launch?" asked General Krall, a reptilian being whose scales clicked when he moved. "And you have 5 backup systems for life support?" Thomas nodded. "Safety is our primary concern when lives are at stake." The aliens exchanged glances, and Thomas couldn't miss their changed expressions. "On our world," continued Krall, "a warrior proves their worth by embracing risk. Your methods seem excessively cautious." Over the next week, similar comments piled up. The human delegation was invited aboard the Union's flagship for a grand tour of nearby systems. Thomas noticed how the alien pilots maneuvered their ships, fast, aggressive, with what humans would consider reckless disregard for safety margins. During a formal dinner with representatives from 12 alien civilizations, the topic came up again. "Humans are unique among spacefaring species," announced Ambassador Trill, a gaseous being contained in a floating orb. "Most races reach the stars through bold experimentation and daring. Your records show that humans test, verify, and then test again. Most curious." Thomas sipped his water, uncomfortable with the attention. "We've learned from our mistakes. Earth's history is filled with disasters that could have been prevented with proper caution." The dining hall erupted in strange sounds, the alien equivalent of laughter. "The humans want to prevent all problems before they happen," hooted a small, furry diplomat. "Imagine if the Zoracs had waited until they were ready to attempt spaceflight. They would still be crawling on their home planet." Thomas felt his face grow hot, but maintained his diplomatic smile. Different approaches work for different species. Later that month, Earth was formally invited to join the Galactic Union. The ceremony was broadcast to every corner of the planet. But as Thomas signed the treaty, he couldn't shake the feeling that humans were viewed as the timid children of the galaxy. In private council meetings, he heard the whispers. "The humans triple-check everything. They build ships with hull plating twice as thick as necessary. They refuse to use experimental jump drives. Have you seen their emergency protocols? Pages and pages of contingencies." The word spread throughout the Union. Humans were the cowards of the galaxy. Too scared to take risks. Too cautious to make great leaps forward. Thomas reported back to Earth's leaders about their new reputation. "They don't respect our methods," he explained during a closed meeting. "They see our safety measures as weakness." President Wilson leaned forward in her chair. "Let them think what they want. We didn't get this far by taking unnecessary risks with human lives." Little did any of them know that in just 3 years, the galaxy would face a threat that would test every species' approach to survival and prove which philosophy was truly stronger. 3 years passed since Earth joined the Galactic Union. Humans slowly found their place among the stars, though they were still often the butt of jokes. Their ships were called flying fortresses because of their thick hulls and multiple backup systems. Their spacesuits, with their triple-sealed joints and emergency oxygen reserves, were mocked as mobile bunkers. Captain Jack Wilson commanded the Earth vessel Prudence, a medium-sized exploration ship with a crew of 40 humans. Unlike most Union ships, the Prudence moved cautiously through space, always scanning ahead, always ready to change course if needed. Captain, incoming message from Union Command, called out Communications Officer Pete Davis. Priority level Alpha. Jack straightened in his chair. Alpha messages were rare. Put it through, he ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing the stern face of Admiral Thrix, a four-armed being with metallic skin that reflected the light of his command center. Captain Wilson, all Union vessels are being notified of an emerging threat. 3 outer colony worlds have gone silent in the past month. The last transmission from Outpost Delta contained this footage. The screen changed to show a grainy video of panicked aliens running from what looked like a moving shadow. The darkness seemed to flow like water, consuming everything it touched. The screams needed no translation. "What are we looking at, Admiral?" Jack asked, his voice steady despite the disturbing images. "We're calling them Void Eaters," Thrix replied. "Some kind of hive-mind entity that consumes organic matter. The War Council is assembling at Station Zenith. Your ship is to report there for assignment. We'll set course immediately." 2 days later, the Prudence docked at Station Zenith, a massive wheel-shaped structure that served as the Union's military headquarters. Inside the main council chamber, representatives from 20 species argued loudly over strategy. General Krall, now older but no less intimidating, pounded his fist on the table. "We strike hard and fast. The Zorax battle fleet can reach the Void Eaters in 3 days. We will crush them before they advance further." Cheers erupted from the more aggressive species. Jack exchanged glances with Admiral Lisa Martinez, Earth's representative at the council. Lisa stood. "With respect, General, we know almost nothing about this enemy. Perhaps we should send reconnaissance ships first, gather data before committing our forces." The room fell silent before erupting in dismissive growls and hisses. "Typical human caution," sneered Commander Vrax, a winged being known for his daring attacks against space pirates. "While we gather data, more worlds will die." General Krall nodded. "The time for action is now. The human suggestion is noted but unnecessary." Jack watched as the War Council outlined their plan. The combined might of the Union's military would converge on the Void Eaters' last known position. The strategy was straightforward: overwhelm the enemy with superior firepower. After the meeting, Lisa pulled Jack aside in a quiet corridor. "They're not listening," she said, frustration clear in her voice. "We don't know what we're dealing with, and they're sending the fleet blind." Jack nodded. "What are our orders?" "The Prudence and 3 other human vessels are assigned to supply line protection. They don't want us in the main battle." "Second line duty," Jack sighed. "They think we'll slow them down with our excessive caution," Lisa said bitterly. Intelligence reports from the border systems arrived daily. The Void Eaters had changed direction, now heading toward the Rigel system, home to over 9 billion beings spread across 7 planets. Jack studied the reports carefully, noting patterns that the War Council seemed to ignore. The Void Eaters weren't moving randomly. They seemed to anticipate resistance, avoid heavily armed areas, and target vulnerable populations first. "They're intelligent," he muttered to his first officer, Maya Brown. "This isn't just some mindless swarm." Maya nodded. "And the Council is treating them like a standard enemy force." On the eve of the Great Battle, Jack received his final orders. The Prudence was to remain at the edge of the Rigel system, monitoring supply ships and providing emergency evacuation if needed. As the massive Union fleet departed for what they expected to be a glorious victory, Jack couldn't shake a growing sense of dread. Something about this enemy was different, and the Union's warriors, for all their courage, were flying straight into the unknown. The Union's grand fleet assembled at the edge of the Rigel system, 5,000 warships representing the military might of 20 different species. Their hulls gleamed under the light of distant stars, weapons systems humming with power, as they prepared to face the Void Eaters. From the bridge of the Prudence, Captain Jack Wilson watched the massive armada through long-range scanners. His ship hovered at its assigned position, far from the coming battle. "Fleet communications coming in, Captain," said Pete Davis. "They're beginning the attack." "Put it on speakers," Jack ordered. The bridge filled with the sounds of various commanders calling out to their squadrons. General Krall's voice dominated. "Warriors of the Union, today we cleanse the galaxy of this plague. Attack pattern Omega. Full weapons release. No mercy." The fleet surged forward, breaking into predetermined attack formations. The Zorax heavy cruisers led the charge, their massive ion cannons already firing into the darkness ahead, where sensor readings detected the approaching Void Eaters. First Officer Maya Brown shook her head. "They're going in too fast. No recon, no probing attacks." Jack nodded grimly. "That's not how they fight." The initial clash appeared successful. The Union ships scored direct hits against the dark mass of Void Eaters. Cheers echoed through the communication channels as the front line of the enemy seemed to dissolve under the verage. "They did it," breathed Maya. Jack leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "I'm not so sure." He was right to be doubtful. Within minutes, the tide turned. The Void Eaters seemed to flow around the energy weapons, adapting to each attack pattern. The dark mass separated into hundreds of smaller units, each targeting individual ships. "What's happening?" asked Maya as the communications filled with panicked shouts. On the tactical display, red dots representing Union ships began to disappear at an alarming rate. "My shields are failing. They're absorbing our energy weapons. The Void is inside the ship. It's eating through the hull. Fall back. Fall back." Horror spread across the faces of the Prudence's crew as they watched the battle unfold. The Void Eaters didn't just attack ships. They consumed them entirely, growing larger with each vessel they devoured. General Krall's voice came through, strained and desperate. All ships formed defensive perimeter around the command vessel. Too late, the Union's carefully planned formations had broken down into chaos. Ships fired in all directions, some accidentally hitting their allies in the confusion. "Captain," Maya said quietly, "we should be recording all of this. Someone needs to analyze what's happening." Jack nodded. "Full sensor sweep. Record everything, every frequency, every energy signature." For 6 terrible hours, they watched the massacre. The proud Union fleet, the greatest military force in the galaxy, was being systematically destroyed. By the end, only a few hundred ships remained, retreating in all directions. The Prudence's communication system chimed with an incoming private message from Admiral Lisa Martinez. Her face appeared on screen, ash-streaked and bloody. "Jack, it's a disaster. The War Council is in shambles. Most of the alien leaders are retreating to defend their home systems." "What about Rigel?" Jack asked. "Evacuation orders have been issued, but there's no way to get 9 billion people out in time." Her voice broke. "The Council is fragmenting. Each species is looking out for themselves now." Jack's hands tightened on the arms of his chair. "What are our orders?" "Official orders are to return to Earth space immediately to help organize defense there." She paused, her eyes meeting his through the screen. "But Jack, if everyone runs, billions die." The bridge fell silent as the crew waited for their captain's decision. Jack stood up. "Navigation. Maintain our position. Do not set course for Earth." "Captain." Maya looked concerned. "Those are direct orders. Sometimes orders are wrong." Jack turned to his science officer. "Dr. Foster, continue recording everything about the Void Eaters' movement patterns. Communications, reach out to any human ships in the area. Quietly." "What are we doing, sir?" asked Pete. Jack's face was grim but determined. The Union warriors rushed in without understanding the enemy, and they failed. Now it's time for the cautious humans to try things our way. He looked at the tactical display showing the Void Eaters moving inexorably toward the populated planets of Rigel. "We observe. We analyze, we plan, and then, only then, we act. The Prudence drifted silently in the shadow of an asteroid, all non-essential systems powered down to avoid detection. For 3 days, Captain Jack Wilson and his crew had been observing the Void Eaters as they began their assault on the Rigel system's outer planets. Dr. Emma Foster hunched over her science station, dark circles under her eyes from lack of sleep. Screens surrounding her displayed countless data streams, radiation readings, energy signatures, movement patterns, and atmospheric changes. "Captain, I think I found something," she said, her voice rough from exhaustion. Jack moved to her station. "Show me." Emma pointed to a series of wavelength patterns. The Void Eaters aren't a single entity. They're billions of microscopic organisms working together. Look at these communication pulses between them. The screen showed rapid flashes of energy moving through the dark mass. "They're talking to each other?" Jack asked. "More like a hive mind. One central intelligence controlling billions of smaller units." Emma pulled up another screen. "And there's something else. Every time Union ships attacked with energy weapons, the Void adapted within seconds. But..." She showed footage of a small Union scout ship that had attempted to escape by releasing a cloud of mining explosives, simple chemical devices. The Void Eaters that touched these explosives had briefly recoiled. "They struggle with mechanical and chemical threats," Emma explained. "Anything non-electronic, they can eventually overcome it, but it takes them longer to adapt." Jack's eyes widened with understanding. The Union relies almost entirely on energy weapons and shields. No wonder they were overwhelmed. First Officer Maya stepped closer. "The Void can't be everywhere at once. Look at these movement patterns. They're avoiding certain radiation bands from the Rigel star. And their consumption rate isn't constant," added Dr. Foster. "They slow down after feeding. They need time to process what they consume." Jack straightened, his mind racing. "We need more data, and we need more ships." He turned to his communications officer. "Pete, any response from other human vessels?" Pete nodded. 7 ships have acknowledged, Captain. They're maintaining communication silence but are awaiting your instructions." "Good. Send them our findings and request their own observations." Jack walked to the central holographic display. "Navigation. Plot a course that will let us observe the Void's behavior around Rigel IV without being detected." For the next 2 days, the human ships conducted a coordinated observation campaign, each taking position around different parts of the Rigel system. They shared data constantly, building a comprehensive picture of their enemy. Captain Nora Lee of the Earth vessel Caution discovered that the Void Eaters moved more slowly through areas with certain gas mixtures. Commander Robert Puttle of the Forethought noticed they avoided extreme temperature variations. Each new piece of information was carefully documented and analyzed. On the 6th day, Jack received an encrypted message from Admiral Lisa Martinez. "Captain Wilson, I hope this finds you alive. Earth Command has noticed that none of our ships returned home as ordered." Her expression was stern, but her eyes showed understanding. "Officially, I should court-martial you for disobedience. Unofficially, what have you found?" Jack sent her everything. All the data, all the observations, all the patterns they had discovered. Hours later, a response came through. Lisa's face appeared on screen, looking more hopeful than before. "I've reviewed your findings with Earth's top scientists. We believe we can create a defense strategy, but we'll need all available human ships. I'm organizing an emergency meeting on the far side of Rigel's outermost moon. Can you make it?" "We'll be there," Jack promised. 2 days later, 14 human ships gathered in the shadow of a barren moon. Inside a makeshift conference room aboard the largest vessel, the Marathon, captains and science officers shared their findings in person for the first time. Admiral Martinez stood before a large tactical display. "Thanks to your disobedience, for which you'll all receive official reprimands and unofficial commendations, we now understand our enemy better than anyone in the Union." She gestured to the display, which showed a detailed map of the Void Eaters' movements. weaknesses, and patterns. The void consumes energy but struggles with mechanical systems. It communicates across its mass, but has a central control point. It can adapt to threats, but not instantaneously. Lissa looked around the room. Using this information, Earth's Defense Council has authorized Operation Tortoise Shell. Jack raised an eyebrow. Tortoise Shell. Lissa smiled grimly. The tortoise was mocked for its slowness, but its shell kept it safe. Sometimes, defense is the best defense. She activated a holographic simulation showing a new formation of ships, layered defenses, and specialized weapons. This plan goes against everything the Union warriors believe in, she said. It's cautious. It's methodical. It's defensive. Her eyes gleamed with determination. It's human, and it's our best hope to save billions of lives. The remains of the Galactic Union War Council gathered in the Emergency Command Center on Rigel Aya. Only 12 of the original 20 representatives had survived the disastrous battle. Their faces showed defeat and fear as they argued over evacuation priorities. The massive doors slid open, and Admiral Lisa Martinez walked in, followed by Captain Jack Wilson and the captains of 6 other human vessels. The alien representatives fell silent. General Krall, his scales dulled with fatigue, spoke first. "Humans, we thought you had retreated to your home system." His tone carried both surprise and accusation. "We were gathering intelligence," Lisa replied calmly, placing a data drive in the center of the table, "and developing a strategy." Commander Vrax, one of the few survivors of the frontline attack, sneered. "What strategy?" "Hide until the void passes, build thicker walls." Jack stepped forward. "Actually, yes. Among other things." He activated the holographic display, showing detailed scans of the Void Eaters that the human ships had collected over the past week. While the Union fleet was fighting, we were watching. The Void Eaters have specific weaknesses and patterns. Jack pointed to different sections of the display. They're vulnerable to certain chemical compounds. They avoid extreme temperature fluctuations. And most importantly, they have a centralized control structure. The alien representatives leaned forward, studying the data with newfound interest. Lisa continued, "We've developed a defensive strategy that could protect Rigel's inner planets and potentially defeat the Void Eaters entirely." "A defensive strategy?" questioned Delegate Moore, a crystalline being whose voice chimed like glass. "The greatest attack force in galactic history couldn't defeat them. How will defense succeed where offense failed?" "Because we're not trying to overpower them," Jack explained. "We're going to outlast them, contain them, and then target their weakness." He activated a simulation showing a complex formation of ships arranged in concentric layers around Rigel's inhabited worlds. "Operation Tortoise Shell," Lisa announced. 3 defensive layers using retrofitted ships. The outer layer will deploy specialized chemical barriers. The middle layer will create extreme temperature zones. The inner layer will protect civilian populations while our specialized strike teams locate and isolate the Void's central intelligence. Silence fell over the room as the Council studied the plan. It was unlike any battle strategy they had ever considered. General Krall scoffed. "This is the human approach. To build walls and hide behind them. This is why we kept you from the front lines." "The front lines no longer exist, General," Jack replied quietly. "Neither does most of your fleet." The harsh truth hung in the air. Admiral Martinez stepped forward. "We don't need your permission to implement this plan. Earth ships are already being modified for their roles. But we do need your cooperation if we want to save the billions of lives in this system." "Why should we trust humans to lead us now?" asked Commander Vrax. Jack touched a control, and the display showed footage of the failed battle. "Because your way didn't work. You charged in without understanding what you were fighting. That's not courage, it's recklessness." Lisa's voice softened. "The Union has called humans cowards for 3 years because we prepare, we analyze, we take precautions. But there's a difference between cowardice and prudence. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't to attack. It's to stand your ground. Delegate Moore's crystalline form glimmered as she turned to the other council members. My people are logical above all else. The humans have data we lack. Their analysis is sound. I vote we follow their plan. One by one, other delegates voiced their support, some enthusiastic, others reluctant. General Krall was the last to speak. He stood tall, his warrior's pride still evident despite recent defeat. I have lost 2/3 of my fleet and many of my finest warriors, he said slowly. Perhaps there is wisdom in trying a different approach. He looked directly at Jack. We will provide the remaining ships of the Union to your tortoise shell. But know this, human, if you fail, there will be no second chance. The void will consume us all. Jack nodded solemnly. We understand the stakes, General. Then let us begin, Lisa declared. We have 3 days before the Void Eaters reach Rigel II. Every ship must be modified, every crew trained on their new role. As the council dispersed to implement the plan, Jack turned to Lisa. They're still not convinced this will work. Lisa smiled grimly. Then we'll just have to prove them wrong. The space around Rigel II glittered with the lights of 500 ships arranged in perfect concentric circles. 3 days of frantic work had transformed the remaining Union vessels according to human specifications. Each ship now carried modified weapons and defense systems designed specifically to counter the Void Eaters. Captain Jack Wilson stood on the bridge of the Prudence, which had been positioned in the middle defensive layer. His crew worked with practiced efficiency, running final system checks. All ships reporting ready, Captain, said Pete Davis from Communications. Admiral Martinez has given the code name New Hope to this operation. Jack nodded. Appropriate. We could all use some hope right now. The long-range sensors blinked with warning lights. Maya Brown's face tightened as she read the incoming data. Captain, the Void Eaters have changed course. They're approaching faster than predicted. Arrival in 20 minutes. All ships, battle stations, Jack ordered calmly. Remember your training. No one breaks formation without direct orders. Across the defensive shell, crews that had once mocked human caution now followed human protocols. Triple checks of systems, backup power reserves, emergency plans for every scenario. General Krall's flagship, the Warrior's Pride, hovered near the Prudence. His voice came through on the command channel. This formation feels wrong, human. My warriors are born to attack, not to wait. Sometimes the strongest position is holding your ground, General, Jack replied. Your warriors will have their chance to fight, but in our way, not the Void's. The first visual contact came minutes later. A massive dark cloud spreading across the stars, consuming light itself. It moved like a living thing, pulsing and flowing through space. Outer layer, prepare chemical barriers. Admiral Martinez commanded from her position on the command ship. Dozens of specialized ships released clouds of chemicals into space, compounds that human scientists had discovered were toxic to the Void Eaters. The dark mass touched the chemical barrier and recoiled, then began probing for weaknesses. They're testing our defenses, Jack observed, just as we predicted. Hours passed. The Void Eaters circled the defensive formation, occasionally pushing against the outer layer only to be repelled. Tension grew among the crews as the waiting continued. Why don't they attack in force? Demanded General Krall. This is not how battles are fought. They're looking for a weakness, Jack explained. But our formation doesn't have the gaps their previous opponents had. On the second day, the Void Eaters changed tactics. They concentrated their mass on one section of the outer layer, overwhelming the chemical barriers. Section 3 is failing, reported a frantic alien commander. Hold your positions, Jack ordered. Middle layer ships in sectors 2 through 4 prepare temperature weapons. As the Void Eaters broke through the first layer, they met a wall of extreme cold created by specialized freeze cannons. The dark mass slowed dramatically, parts of it crystallizing in the absolute zero temperature. It's working, Maya exclaimed. For now, Jack cautioned. They'll adapt eventually. By the third day, crews were exhausted but holding firm. The Void Eaters had tested every section of the defensive shell but had not broken through to the populated planets. However, the Defenders' resources were not infinite. Fuel cells were draining, chemical reserves running low. "We cannot maintain this defense forever," General Krall warned during a command meeting. "My ships report power levels at 30%. Jack nodded grimly. "We don't need forever. Just long enough." Dr. Foster's voice cut through the tension on the bridge. "Captain, I've located it. The central control node." All eyes turned to her display, which showed a denser concentration at the heart of the void mass. "The hive mind?" Jack asked. "Yes, sir. It's directing the attacks, but it's staying back from the front lines. That's why it's taken so long to find." Jack opened a channel to Admiral Martinez. "Admiral, we've located the control node. Request permission to implement Phase 3. Lisa's voice was steady. "Permission granted, Captain. Take your strike team. We'll hold the line here." As Jack prepared to leave the bridge, Maya touched his arm. "The strike ships have minimal shielding. It's a one-way trip unless we can shut down the hive mind quickly." Jack smiled. "That's why we triple-checked everything, First Officer. That's why we prepared. That's the human way." He looked around at his crew, at the determination in their eyes, the resolve in their posture. "Hold the line," he told them. "No matter what happens, hold the line." 3 small ships detached from the middle defensive layer, sleek and agile compared to the larger vessels maintaining the protective shell. Captain Jack Wilson sat at the controls of the lead ship, with Dr. Emma Foster and Lieutenant Mike Grayson as his only crew. Strike team reporting clear of the defensive perimeter. Jack reported to Admiral Martinez. "Beginning approach to target." "Acknowledged, Captain," Lisa replied, her voice tight with tension. "Remember, you have 45 minutes before your shields fail against void exposure." "We'll be quick," Jack promised, though they all knew quick wasn't the human way. Thorough was the human way. Careful was the human way. And right now, those qualities were humanity's greatest weapons. The 3 ships accelerated toward the massive dark cloud that surrounded them. Using the data Dr. Foster had collected, they navigated toward the denser central region, where the hive mind controlled its billions of individual units. "They've spotted us," Mike reported as tendrils of darkness reached toward their ships. Evasive maneuvers. The human pilots executed their carefully planned flight paths, releasing clouds of the specialized chemicals behind them. The void tendrils recoiled from the toxic substances, creating temporary safe corridors through the darkness. "Central node 10 kilometers ahead," Emma announced, eyes fixed on her instruments. "Density readings are off the scale." Through the forward viewport, they could see it, a pulsing center of absolute blackness, darker than the surrounding mass. Energy patterns flowed from it in all directions, controlling the vast organism. "Deploying disruptors," Jack ordered. Each ship released a specialized device, the result of human engineers working around the clock to develop a weapon that could sever the connections between the hive mind and its components. The disruptors looked simple, mechanical rather than energy-based, with chemical delivery systems rather than electronic ones. "Simple is better against an enemy that adapts to energy weapons," Emma had explained during the planning phase. "Sometimes the oldest technologies are the hardest to counter." The disruptors floated toward the central node, undetected amidst the void's focus on the defensive shell kilometers away. "Activation in 3, 2, 1. Jack pressed the detonator. The devices released a complex mixture of chemicals that interrupted the void's communication frequencies. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The pulsing center convulsed, sending chaotic energy patterns through the surrounding mass. The Void Eaters, previously moving with eerie coordination, began to drift aimlessly. "It's working," Emma exclaimed. "The connection is breaking down." Jack didn't celebrate yet. Phase 2. Now. Mike activated the second weapon system, a modified mining explosive packed with the chemical compounds the Void found most toxic. The three ships launched their payloads directly into the now vulnerable central node. The explosion wasn't bright or dramatic, just a silent ripple through the darkness. But its effect cascaded outward. Without central control, the billions of microscopic organisms that made up the Void Eaters lost cohesion. Some died from the chemicals, others drifted away, still others turned on each other. "Strike team to Admiral Martinez," Jack called. "Target neutralized." "Repeat, target neutralized." Across the Rigel system, crews watched in amazement as the seemingly invincible enemy dissolved into harmless scattered particles. 3 days later, the Galactic Union Council convened in the Great Hall on Rigel II. Every surviving ship captain was present, along with planetary leaders and military commanders. At the center of the hall stood Admiral Lisa Martinez and the human captains who had led Operation Tortoiseshell. General Krall approached the podium, his scales now gleaming with renewed vigor. The hall fell silent. "For 3 years," he began, "the Union has known humans as the cautious species, the careful ones, the cowards." He paused, looking directly at the human delegation. "We were wrong." Murmurs spread through the hall. What we called cowardice was wisdom. What we mocked as hesitation was proper preparation. What we saw as weakness was, in fact, strength. Krall's voice carried throughout the chamber. When the bravest warriors of the galaxy retreated to save themselves, the humans stood firm to save everyone. He turned to face the entire assembly. "Today, I propose a new understanding. The term human caution shall no longer be an insult, but a standard to which we should all aspire." The hall erupted in cheers and the alien equivalent of applause. As the celebration continued, Jack found himself standing beside Admiral Martinez, watching different species intermingle with new respect. "Think they've really changed their minds about humans?" he asked quietly. Lisa smiled. "Actions speak louder than words, Captain, and our actions just saved billions of lives." "Not bad for a bunch of cowards," Jack said with a grin. "Not cowards," Lisa corrected. "Just smart enough to know that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to look before you leap." Across the galaxy, the story spread. How humans, the most cautious species in the Union, had been the only ones brave enough to stand against the darkness when it mattered most.